So we're going to continue on our talk. So we have one more talk and then we'll have another break. So this is Konyere Nwosu, and she's going to be presenting her presentation entitled The Impact of Racial Profiling and AI. And just so you know, there are no slides, so you have to take away.
Hello, everyone. Apologies for no slides. My slides corrupted this morning. So at an ethics of AI presentation, this is quite ironic. But anyways, my name is Konyere Nwosu. I'm a graduate from the University of Waterloo. I met Mr. Silk in my first year. He was basically a doctor. Okay. Well, back when he was Mr. Silk, I met him at my agree to disagree ethics conversation with my arts 140. Great time, got interested in artificial intelligence, met a lot of people and learned a lot of new things. So today, I was talking about the impacts of racial profiling and AI. So in the last 10 years alone, artificial intelligence, particularly facial recognition technology, have been rapidly transforming modern society. Governments use it to track immigration records, police departments rely on it for identifying suspects, and corporations use it to verify identities. In theory, these technologies should aid in efficiency, objectivity, and neutrality, but in practice, they often reproduce the very biases that they're supposed to eliminate. So one of the scholars that examined this concern very critically is Dr. Gideon Christian. He's a law professor and university research chair of AI and law at the University of Calgary. I had the privilege of interviewing him for my presentation today. We met 3 years ago as well, and he also sparked a lot of my interest with ethics in AI and racial profiling in AI and law. And so a lot of his opinions examine artificial intelligence, not just as a technical tool, but as a social system shaped by human decisions, historical inequities, and biased data. In particular, his work, including AI facial recognition technology, the black box hurting people, made in 2023, and the new Jim Crow, unmasking racial bias in AI facial recognition technology within the Canadian immigration system in 2024, he reveals how AI systems can reinforce racial profiling and systemic discrimination. More recently, his concerns have been reinforced by another professor's article, When the Algorithm is Wrong, a new partnership calls out racism in AI systems. And this was written by Cynthia McDonald this year, 2026. So what brings my attention to AI, a lot of the first things he told me during our interview was that the military origins of AI and facial recognition technology wasn't really trained on the internet of images and on the things we see through social medias, but it's on curated data sets dominated by the images of white majority groups. Together, these works reveal a crucial truth, which is that artificial intelligence is not immune to racism. Instead, when designed without accountability, it can automate and amplify discrimination. So today I'll be exploring 3 main ideas. How racial profiling can be embedded into AI systems, how Dr. Christian's work and research exposes these dangers, particularly with facial recognition technology and immigration systems, and then why emerging research and public awareness efforts are essential into creating more equitable AI systems. So one of the most persistent myths about artificial intelligence is that it is objective. Many people believe that because algorithms rely on mathematics and data, that they must therefore be unbiased. However, as Dr. Christian argues, this belief is fundamentally false. It reflects the data, assumptions, and social structures that created it. Facial recognition technology is a powerful example of this problem. These systems work by analyzing images and converting facial features into digital templates. The algorithm then compares these templates to images stored in large databases to identify potential matches. In theory, this process should work equally well for everyone, but in reality, it does not. Research shows that many facial recognition systems are trained primarily on datasets dominated by white faces, I mentioned before. And as a result, the AI tools become highly inaccurate in recognizing other faces apart from white individuals, particularly people of color. According to Dr. Christian's research, some facial recognition systems achieve accuracy rates of over 99% for white male faces, yet their error rates are dramatically higher for people with darker skin tones, so especially Black women. This imbalance is a real concern and can have serious consequences. If the AI system misidentifies someone, the error is not just a technical glitch. If evolved without being adjusted, it could lead to wrongful arrests, legal consequences, and long-term reputational damage. So we had the opportunity to discuss his 2023 article, AI Facial Recognition Technology, the Black Box Hurting People. He introduces a key concern, the lack of transparency in AI systems. He brought up one of his most popular cases with this article, with Miss AB, named undescribed for discretionary purposes, but she's a Black woman from Africa who made a refugee claim in Canada. When she walked into a licensing office, so the MTO, the Ministry of Transportation, to have her photo taken for her driver's license, the ministry used artificial intelligence, facial recognition technology, so FRT, to match her photo to some other woman in its database. The MTO passed off this information to Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, and subsequently her refugee status got revoked. It was revealed that the FRT used Clearview AI, which has since been removed from their program. However, the changes to the AI system itself were not addressed or implemented. In these cases, Dr. Christian labels these modern algorithms functions as black boxes. So this means their decision-making processes are difficult, even for the creators to fully understand. He used the example of when you ask an AI to write a summary of a novel, and then you ask it to provide in-text citations, the AI system tends to admit after the fact that they did fully research the novel, but created assumptions on what they thought the summary would be included. This creates a very concerning situation. Decisions that can affect people's freedom, immigration status, or employment opportunities may be made by these systems that cannot easily explain or provide evidence of their conclusions. When an AI system identifies someone as a suspect, for example, the person affected often has no way to challenge the algorithm's reasoning because there's no evidence until after the fact. Dr. Christian argues that this lack of transparency is particularly dangerous when combined with racial bias. If the technology is inaccurate or opaque, individuals may face serious consequences without meaningful legal recourse. Without transparency and oversight, AI decisions can become virtually unquestionable. Now, his most striking argument comes from one of his more newer papers, The New Jim Crow, Unmasking Racial Bias in AI Facial Recognition. In this work, Dr. Christian draws a historical parallel between modern AI systems and the racial segregation laws of the past. He argues that certain uses of AI, particularly in immigration enforcement, risk creating a modern technological equivalent. While these AI systems are intended to improve efficiency and security, Dr. Christian warns that they may disproportionately harm racialized immigrants. These errors are not trivial, or they're not administrative mistakes. They can jeopardize a person's safety, legal rights, and ability to remain in a country. Dr. Christian argues that such outcomes reveal AI technologies can reproduce historical patterns of racial exclusion and only promote the prominence of discrimination. For this reason, Dr. Christian launched this new initiative at the University of Calgary called Technological Civil Rights Movement. Such movements as these can push governments and corporations to ensure that AI systems respect human rights and uphold principles of fairness and equality in the technological space. So with his concerns, he also brought up another legal scholar, Cynthia McDonald. In her new article in 2026, she highlighted real-world examples of AI bias affecting people's lives. Her article describes cases in which facial FRT incorrectly identified Black individuals as suspects in crimes that they did not commit. Her case example involved a pregnant woman who was falsely accused of robbery and carjacking. Another example was a man who spent 30 hours in police custody for being wrongly identified by an AI system. These systems increasingly used to make decisions about employment, loans, insurance, immigration, and if they continue to rely on biased data, they can reproduce discrimination across many areas of society. The root of the problem, as McDonald explains, lies in the training of the data. Large data sets often reflect historical inequities, and when these AI systems learn patterns from those data sets, they replicate the same inequalities from their predecessors. In other words, AI can turn past discrimination into automated decision making. To address this challenge, she also launched another experiment. She launched an interdisciplinary collaboration with other scholars and professors named the Algorithmic Bias in Canada. This initiative brings together philosophers, computer scientists, policymakers, and community organizations to study algorithmic discrimination and propose solutions. Their work emphasizes the crucial point that fixing AI is not just a technical problem, it is also a social and ethical challenge that requires broader collaboration. So going back to Dr. Christian, I asked him what solutions would he propose in dissecting racial bias in artificial intelligence and working towards rectifying it. So admittedly so, he said that he does not have all of the answers, but he proposed a few ideas. First, I wish, but first he talked about AI systems. They have to undergo rigorous testing for racial and gender bias before they are deployed. So this is just as how medical treatments undergo clinical trials to ensure safety. AI systems need to be evaluated to ensure they do not disproportionately harm certain groups, especially racial groups. Second, he proposed that governments must ensure transparency in their AI decision making. So the people who are automated decisions should have the right to know when AI was used and the opportunity to challenge those decisions immediately. Third, diversity within the technology industry must improve. So if an AI system is designed primarily by teams using limited data sets, they're more likely to overlook the experiences of marginalized community. As Dr. Christian emphasizes, diversity in design matters. And so inclusive teams and representative data sets are needed to help reduce the risk of biased outcomes. And finally, policymakers must establish clear legal frameworks regarding and regulating AI technologies. Without strong oversight, corporations and governments may deploy powerful AI systems without sufficient accountability. Taken together, the research from Dr. Christian and the analysis presented in his Artificial Impartiality reveal a reality that we are living in a new world, and it's very concerning of what racial bias may be in AI systems. This is why he also highlights the work with Cynthia McDonald. Scholars, activists, technologists are increasingly recognizing that AI bias is not a technical error, it's also a civil rights issue. Addressing this will require new forms of accountability, diversity in technology development, and stronger regulatory oversight. Artificial intelligence is often portrayed as the future, and in many ways it is, and AI has the potential to improve healthcare, streamline government services, and refresh scientific research. But as the work of Dr. Christian and McDonald demonstrate, technology alone does not guarantee progress. Christian's research reminds us that technology and technological innovation must be accommodated and accompanied by ethical responsibility. Similarly, Dr. Christian's article shows that scholars, policymakers, and communities are beginning to confront these challenges together, but a lot more work is needed. This work represents an important step towards ensuring that artificial intelligence serves society fairly, and it is imperative that the future of technology is not only intelligent, but also fair. Thank you.
So your concerns about racial discrimination are so important here. But even someone, I'm not sure if you read her book, but Lua Benjamin explains some of this. She's a Princeton sociologist there. And one of the things she considers, and I'm wondering your thoughts is how AI can also become abolitionist tools. So for example, it could flag if there's a disproportionate number of students of, like, say, certain background, right? And then it could alert us to those things. And she is wondering, like, whether or not this is a sort of two-edged sword, right? On the one hand, yes, it can reinforce existing systems of discrimination, and that's a huge concern, like you said, with the new Jim Crow. But also, do you think there's the possibility for sort of abolitionist tools or kind of, exposing racism and using those tools, AI tools, to effectively do that?
That's a fair question. I think one of the main things that Dr. Christian, like he was very concerned about, was that there wasn't any due diligence when it came to these AI systems. So when we do use these systems, good or bad, there isn't a double check. There isn't someone also ensuring that these systems are being used the proper way and that the information is accurate. While we might also have AI systems that can recognize disproportionate racial groups in universities or in certain parts of the world, I think we also need to have that due process and due diligence to recognize that there needs to be somebody, a human, and somebody who can recognize these disproportionalities, not just an AI bot being there to answer all these questions. So I think it applies to both good systems and bad systems, but there needs to be someone also double checking, and there needs to be someone committing that due process. Yes.
Just wondering if, there's been tons of research into building these, AI systems. And, but the sensory systems have lagged behind. So I'm just wondering if in your research and what you've read about, if you tripped across the disconnect that, the bots are very good now, but they're kind of like the disembodied mind, where the sensory things like the vision systems and tactile systems and hearing and eyes and all that are lagging behind. So for example, there was a article published last week from a prof from MIT, which was like startling to me. So in our hand, there are 17,000 sensors that, to pick things up, and he's like, to make an artificial hand be able to do that, it's 100 years away. So I'm just wondering if you've considered the input systems. Like, in other words, like some of the bias isn't just the AI chatbot, whatever. It's the way the input, the cameras, whatever brought in. I'm just curious if you've tripped across that.
That's a good question. Terms of that, I also going back to this. So with the research that both McDonald and Christian did, they found that the first AI systems used were for the military. So they prioritize military contracts, and going down that hierarchy, it goes to military, police, government services. So that priority list first goes to recognizing police services and what things that are needed within those systems. I think when it comes to sensory systems, there are a lot of progress and a lot of things that can be made, but it's also up to funding and priority lists. And the origination of artificial intelligence first came from military. So that's where the priority lies first before moving into all these other systems. It is unfortunate, but it is the reality that we're also in right now. Yeah.
If I could just slightly add on or contribute to this too, it's important to remember too that the input systems themselves can also be biased, right? So cameras, for example, have a history of technological bias in terms of not being able to sort of photograph people with darker skin tones very well, right? And so like if you have a bias, you can have a biased training data set about how to interpret the data, but also if the camera itself is biased, then you're still going to have these problems as well.
It's so true as well. Also, AI takes knowledge from past sources, and it converts information from the history that it's already been given from individuals. And so if their background and their plethora of knowledge comes from white filmmakers, or people who have only been used to one color of skin or one texture of skin, that is how they interpret these systems with their cameras or this progress with
So just to follow up, I don't know what's the technology we could call it, but I know for gender,
Okay.
there's a toolkit, counterfactual data augmentation. So, all the way back even to the Greeks, there's a lot of men in history, so it's in the data, okay? So if the CDA you can take a data set and you can take the 31 genders that the United Nations, defines, and you can balance the data set. So now you've got a data set that represents the actual population. And I was just wondering if there's any, like what Dr. Silk said, the cameras aren't, the data that goes into the training set, especially for, images, all of the cameras that we use are all different. They all have different, you know what I mean? So you've got like this huge multiplied problem of, maybe the camera was a really crappy black and white. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if, that's why I asked you about the sensory stuff, if there's toolkits that people have looked into, to try and smooth out that problem.
Okay, I think in terms of the camera, I think you're definitely, along the path of, there is a lot of variety with different cameras made, and they may have different settings, but do note that the people behind the camera is what the AI is using that technology and knowledge for. And so if, going back to the Greeks, if the people behind the camera were men or they're white men, the settings are the same for all of the cameras. They still focus on one particular group. In terms of the sensory systems, I would say diversify the people who are identifying these potholes in AI systems. I think it's a lot about the group and the people who are doing these research. If you diversify the group, if you put more women in spaces, more people of color in spaces, I think you begin to identify more sensory systems that need attention. I think that's also part of the problem as well. Oh, okay.
Whose hand is up first? Should we fight? I got a half hour time.
Yeah, so kind of going back to like identifying marginalized people and communities, and I guess like the way I view some of the way that technology is developed is that marginalized groups are almost hyper visible to surveillance systems and police systems and other systems like this, but then in other systems like getting a loan for a house or something like that, they're invisible. And when I guess, what do you view as, I mean, obviously racism, but like the root of some of this when you talk about approaching technological innovation, because obviously the technology is shaped around providing these systems. And so you could say, okay, well, we need more people of color developing technologies, but that by itself, what does that do? Like, from what angle are you approaching it? How are you balancing like these forces of both kind of hyper visibility and surveillance and the sort of invisibility in other sectors?
I think when maybe invisibility in certain sectors, I think we also need to recognize there's a lot of, let's see, for example, housing in America. Zoning laws, redlining, all of these past information, past knowledge that have prevented a lot of marginalized communities from living in certain areas. And that transpires into who can get a mortgage, who can live where, who can have good access to healthcare, good access to schooling, and all of these other systems, or the job, or a lot of AI is based on history. And a lot that we need to recognize as people is that there is a lot of preventative measures made by certain people in power or governments or past history that have prevented people of color from being able to be seen by AI. And that has affected the whole timeline of the way AI interprets information or how they recognize certain groups when it comes to loans or when it comes to more so equal opportunities. I think we need to look at it more so as people being in the space that evaluate AI, but also recognizing that there were preventative measures in the past that affected these minority groups. And so recognizing that as a start point can actually help organize and identify how that has led to where AI is right now. I don't know if that helped answer questions or.
Yeah, but it wasn't a super quick question, but you answered.
I don't know how to answer, in the second half of the question in terms of removing that, hypervisibility.
Yeah, I guess like maybe, obviously there's different types of data being collected, and I guess maybe the question goes back to what are the data collection practices of
Okay.
systems, and I know there are some efforts in different communities to do more kind of positive data collection from within communities, so they have access and control over that data and make some of those aspects more visible. So maybe that's part of the answer, but that's sort of outside of the broader institutional system. But I
I
don't
think there's a lot that can be done. I think in terms of information gathered from who, from what timeline, from which country, there's a lot of information that, for example, AI in America only collects history, geography, science, different subjects based on American interpretation. I think there's a lot more interpretation out in the world that can give alternate perspectives and also help AI become more objective. But it's also to recognize that more people need to be in the room, more perspectives need to be in the room, and different countries need to also have a say.
So it's a cousin question. I was thinking about Patricia's presentation this morning, where she talked about Joy Buolamwini's work, and Jeever's work, and thinking about the pale male problem, where facial recognition software, the major facial recognition software development that was being done by the top 5 or 6 companies, had various like fail rates when we looked intersectionally at people who had darker skin and were in a binary gender analysis female. So you would get these sort of things where it's like you could only, if you did the intersectional analysis, you could see that there were these big problems. It wasn't just black, white, or you couldn't do a single axis that would show the problem in detail. And one of the things, of course, that they did with this information is that, well, let's run basically a guerrilla audit on these systems, and then let's go to these companies. So Joy Buolamwini, we're going to show you this. Can you fix it before we go public with a lot of these problems? And it was amazing how quick the companies developed better techniques for collecting, using training data, and there was still a discrepancy, but things had tightened up a lot. And that really only took them like a few months to tighten things up once they knew the problem. So there's an issue here of who's doing the auditing, right? And if Joy Buolamwini is doing the auditing, then she knows her Crenshaw, she's going to do an intersectional analysis, and this is going to, but of course, we're cutting DEI. These companies are going sort of anti-DEI, anti-woke. We don't need that kind of auditing at all. So there's that problem too. But Joy Buolamwini also focuses on this issue where what that did was make the facial recognition software better. One of the first people to buy it was the Baltimore PD or NYPD. Like it was immediately used as a weapon of the carceral state against Black people. So it's like, my auditing improved this, which made it a more saleable commodity. So like IBM or Microsoft could sell it to law enforcement to continue to, disproportionately surveil and arrest and incarcerate Black people. There's 2 questions in here. One of them is who does the auditing? I think that's a really, not just the data collection, but who does the auditing on these systems when they don't match up against test data? And do we want to help craft these systems? Given that where you were talking about where the technical chain here is military policing, it's surveillance, it's highly oppressive.
I think in terms of recognizing gaps in AI systems, there should be an onus of responsibility on the people using these systems to be done. For example, with policing, if policing were to use AI systems in the long term for identifying criminals or repeat offenders or finding easier ways faster ways, more reliable ways to convict offenders. If there is recognition that these systems aren't working, I think the onus is on police forces to hire people that are able to complete those audits. I don't think it's up to, while we are making progress in terms of creating these groups that we bring a plethora of knowledge, we bring historians and philosophers to come together to also speak about these topics, but we also need these people in positions of power to also take some onus and responsibility. And also to answer your second question in terms of, sorry, your second question in terms of how do we prevent this falling into the wrong hands, or was it?
My question's a little more cynical. It's in the wrong hands.
Oh,
It will be in the wrong hands. It will remain in the wrong hands. Why are we helping the wrong hands?
I know what you mean. The way I see it, if we do nothing, and AI, in comparison from 5 years ago to today, if you look at social media platforms, AI systems, like AI right now have created stories. I am Nigerian, I'm from Imo State, that's a state within Nigeria. I have found an AI story about an Imo girl growing up in Nigeria, living in Lagos, moving to Canada, and a whole story has been found on Instagram about this imaginary person. And AI has continued to grow and evolve faster than anyone would have predicted. I think if we do nothing and these systems become more responsible, or we bring more responsibility on with these systems, like with policing or with law, or allowing AI to be in these positions of decision making or positions of power, and we don't take any responsibility to try to negate any harm that can do to marginalized communities, there's more harm there doing nothing than being there is someone or a group, or unfortunately certain organizations that villainize or use the research done by certain groups to affect and hurt marginalized groups. But I think there is still a responsibility and a need for there to be research done, and a need for more voices to be in that room, as I mentioned before.
So be here for time.
Oh.
Positive round of applause, because she didn't have her slides.